We're looking at part 5 of Federalist number 16. Let's take a look at these words again. These are the ones that you hear quite a bit. Ambition, ambitious, and genius. Ambition and ambitious have that negative connotation. Ambition means the ardent, inordinate desire to rise to high position or to attain rank, influence, distinction, or other preferments. In other words, a person is hungry and thirsty and will do anything to rise to a high position, to attain rank, be somebody in the government, or be somebody that will be influential. It doesn't have the semi-positive meaning that it has these days. When Publius, when Hamilton, Jay, or Madison use it, they're using it in a negative sense. Somebody that you cannot really trust. And genius, when he uses it in the Federalists, he's talking about the prevailing character or spirit of something or a people. The general mood or perception of people at a certain time or place. That's how he uses it. So when he says the genius of the American people, he's talking about this is what most Americans believe about this thing. This is how they look at something. So I will continue with middle of paragraph 4 where I left off. Our past experience has exhibited the operation of this spirit in its full light. There would, in fact, be an insuperable difficulty in ascertaining when force could with propriety be employed. In the article of pecuniary contribution, pecuniary means something that has to do with money. When what we are talking about, what we are thinking about, what we are deciding about has something to do with money, which would be the most usual source of delinquency. Let's say the government, the national government, has asked the state governments to send in some money, and they're delinquent, they're late. It would often be impossible to decide whether it had proceeded from disinclination or inability. Disinclination means lack of desire, whether they just didn't want to give it to us, or inability, whether they were not able to give it to us. The pretense of the latter would always be at hand. People could always fake it or have the excuse that they are unable. That's why he says the latter, he means inability. So the pretense of the latter would always be at hand, and the case must be very flagrant. Flagrant means it's got to be really, really way out there, really, really obvious, and they just want to just say, no, we don't want to work with you, we don't want to cooperate with you, in which its fallacy could be detected with sufficient certainty to justify the harsh expedient of compulsion. So unless they go out of their way, they make it obvious that they really don't want to pay, it's not that they are unable to pay, then we have to force them, compulsion. It is easy to see that this problem alone, as often as it should occur, would open a wide field to the majority that happen to prevail in the National Council for the exercise of factious view, of partiality, and of oppression. Okay. The general theme of this Federalist paper, as well as the last one, all he wants to say is, look, if we have a federal government for it to work, if it enacts laws, if it writes laws, then those laws have to be applicable to the citizens of all the states. And he says, you cannot have a federal system and people in different states not respect the federal law and only respect the state law and say, well, the federal government cannot do anything to me, because if federal government wants to do something, they have to go to my state, ask my state to hand me to them or to force me to go see the federal government and see whether I've broken a law, whether I need to go to jail, whether I need to pay a fine, penalty. So see, he says, if federal government cannot enact laws that work directly on the people, he brings this up over and over, then the federal government will be worthless. It is almost like the Confederacy we have right now. He says under the Articles of Confederation, there's always requisition. You ask the states, please help us out, please give us this, please give us that. And you cannot have a law, let's say you cannot tax the citizens of different states directly. You have to do it through the state. He says, we have seen through experience that this is the worst thing we can do. So, he over and over says, this federal union is going to do something different about it. It is going to say that the laws that it makes, the federal laws, will be applicable to the people. If a person, regardless of what state they live in, whether they live in Georgia, whether they live in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, if they break the federal law, they will have to go to court and let the court decide whether they are found, whether they are guilty or not, whether they need to pay a fine, whether they need to go to jail. And he says, he's going to say over and over, if we stay with the Confederacy that we are in now, this weak union, we're going to have to always go to an army and go try to force the state to work with us, to follow the law. And he says, what kind of a union will that be? It's not going to be a peaceful union. It's going to be one that will be constantly in a state of war. That's why he says from the beginning, we should have a constitution that clearly says that citizens of all the states will have to respect the federal law or they will be punished. So he's going to repeat this over and over again. And he says, again, whenever he says, we cannot go through the states to make this union work, we cannot ask the states always to enforce the law, the federal law, because there will be chaos, total chaos. Just for our purposes, for what our project is, why we are studying the Federalist Papers, imagine someone or a group of people, say a company, somewhere in one of the countries of the world is burning these chemicals that's putting gases up in the atmosphere, up in the air, that because of the wind and flow of the wind is going to bring from one country to another country. And is going to poison not only the population of that country, but the countries that are next to it. If the United Nations were going to do something about it right now, the country who has the people in it that are making this nasty gas and putting it up in the air, United Nations is going to force these people or make them stop it. But if you have a union that says, okay, we're citizens of this planet, you're not going to put these poisonous gases and not only endanger your community, your small community and city, but endanger your country and other countries, you have to be stopped. You have to have a union that can hold that people or group of people accountable. That's where we're going in the world. We're getting closer and closer. We're uniting. Now we are putting things in the atmosphere that is not going just to affect us in one country. It's going to affect everybody. Or whether if we pollute the water, the ocean waters, that's going to affect everybody. The change in climate is going to affect everybody. So we have to start thinking long term. We can't be short-sighted. So that's why we're looking at this Federalist, because it says look at the bigger picture.